English medium, subject history. Lesson number 4. Maharashtra before the times of Shivaji Maharaj. At the beginning of the 17th century CE, most of the territory in Maharashtra was under the control of Nizam Shah of Ahmednagar and Adil Shah of Bijapur. The Mughals had entered Khandesh. Their objective was to expand their power in the north. There were settlements of Siddhi people who had come from Africa along the coastline of Konkan. The competition and conflict among the Portuguese, the British, the French and the Dutch who had come from Europe was getting intense during this period. There was stiff competition amongst them to capture the markets for trade. The Portuguese had already established their rule in Goa and Vasai on the western coastline. The British, the Dutch and the French had found an entry through the medium of trading companies by setting up factories. All these powers assessed the strength of the other powers, kept themselves safe and tried to dominate as much as possible. This conflict had created instability and insecurity in Maharashtra. These different people from Europe were called Topkar on the basis of their customary headgear. It is necessary to get acquainted with the village, Mauja, Kasba and Pargana to understand the nature of settlements in that period, as also of the officers that formed a link between the rulers and their subjects, and also the markets and the craftsmen. Pargana was made up of many villages. Generally, the headquarters of the Pargana was called Kasba. A village smaller than a Kasba was called Mauja. Let us get acquainted in brief with village, Kasba and Pargana respectively. Village, Mauja. Most of the people lived in villages. A village was also called Mauja. The chief of the village was the Patil. He used to try to bring maximum land under cultivation. When there was any dispute in the village, the Patil resolved it and made peace. A Kulkarni helped the Patil in his work. The Kulkarni kept the record of the revenue that was collected. There were various artisans in the village. They had hereditary rights regarding their occupation. The peasants gave a share of their agricultural produce to the artisans for the services they rendered to the village community. This share was known as Baluta. Kasba. A kasba was like a big village. It was usually the headquarters of a pargana. For example, Indapur Kasba of Indapur Pargana, Vai Kasba of Vai Pargana were the headquarters of those parganas. Agriculture was the main occupation. There were skilled artisans like carpenters, blacksmiths, etc. in a kasba. There was usually a market, pet, adjacent to a kasba. The Shete and Mahajan were the Vatandars of the pet. Every village did not necessarily have a pet. The setting up of a pet was the job of the Shetes and the Mahajans. For that, they received some land from the government and some rights from the villagers. The Mahajan maintained the accounts of the pet. Pargana. Many villages together made a pargana. But the number of villages was not the same in all parganas. For example, the Pune Pargana was a big pargana. It consisted of 290 villages. There were 64 villages in the Chakan Pargana. The Shirwal Pargana was small. It had only 40 villages. The Deshmukh and the Deshpande were the Vatandar officers of the Pargana. The Deshmukh was the chief of Patils in a Pargana. The Deshmukhs did at the Pargana level what the Patils did at the village level. Deshpande was the chief of all Kulkarnis in the Pargana. Deshpande did at the Pargana level the work that Kulkarnis did at the village level. These Vatandar officers were the link between the people and the government. In case of enemy invasion or drought, these Vatandars represented the grievances of the people to the government. Sometimes these officers misused their powers. They collected more money from the people than was due, or did not remit the money so collected to the government in time. On such occasions, the people suffered harassment. Agriculture was dependent on rainwater. If it did not rain, crops would fail. The prices of food grains rose. It became difficult for the people to get food grains and other things. There was no fodder for the cattle. Water became scarce. It became difficult for people to live in the village. They were forced to leave the village. A famine was a great calamity for the people. A great famine occurred in Maharashtra in 1630 CC. People were greatly distressed due to this famine. It has been described in these words. People were ready to sell themselves for a piece of bhakri, but there was nobody to buy them. There was a severe scarcity of food grains. Entire families were destroyed. Cattle and farm animals died. Agriculture was devastated. The famine put an end to industries. All financial transactions came to a standstill. People had to wander to faraway regions in search of a livelihood. It was a great challenge to bring back to normalcy the devastated life of the people. The work of the Varkari Movement. Society was greatly influenced by blind beliefs and rituals. People had become fatalistic and inert. They had lost all initiative. The condition of the common people was miserable. In such circumstances, the sons of Maharashtra endeavored to inspire the masses. In Maharashtra, the tradition of sants, which began with Sant Jnaneshwara and Sant Namdev, was carried on by sants coming from various strata of the society. People from all strata of society were part of the Sant tradition. For example, Sant Sokhamela, Sant Goroba, Sant Sena, Sant Sauta, Sant Narahari, Sant Sheikh Muhammad, etc. Sant Chokhoba's wife, Sant Soirabai, and sister Sant Nirmalabai, Sant Muktabai, Sant Janabai, Sant Kanopatra, Sant Bahinabai Shiurkar, and other women were also among them. Pandharpur was the center of the Sant movement. Vitthal was the object of their worship. On the banks of the river Chandrabhaga at Pandharpur, the sons and pilgrims, that is Varkaris, used to rejoice in their devotion, bhakti. There, equality was propagated through bhajans, kirtans, and unity mills, that is Kala. Sant Namdev. He was a great center of Varkari Movement. He was a skilled organizer. He performed excellent kirtans as well. He awakened the sense of equality in men and women belonging to all castes through the medium of kirtans. His pledge was, Nachu kirtanache rangi, jnanadeepa lau jagi. His Abhanga compositions are well known. Many sons as well as common people were influenced by his teachings. He went up to the Punjab, propagating his thoughts. His compositions are included in the Guru Granth Sahib of Sikhs. He propagated the message of Bhagavad religion in all quarters. He built a memorial to the Sant Chokha Mela at Pandharpur. His work is unforgettable. Sant Jnaneshwar. He was a great Santa in the Varkari movement. He wrote the Bhavartha Deepika or Jnaneshwari, which elucidates the meaning of the Sanskrit Bhagavad Gita. He also composed the Amrutanubhav. He preached the importance of the path of devotion through his works and compositions. He showed a simple way of worship and conduct which the common people could follow easily. He gave the prestige of a religion to the Varkari movement. Though his life was spent in extremely adverse circumstances, he never lost the calm of his mind and never harbored bitterness. His Pasayatan in Jnaneshwari uplifts the mind. The poetic compositions of his brothers Santa Nivruttinath and Santa Sopandev and Sister Muktabai are well known. The calamity of a famine. Agriculture was dependent on rainwater. Bhagavad Dharma in detail and in a simple manner. He has portrayed people's life in Bhavartha Ramayana through the story of Ram. He explained in Marathi the bhakti part of the Sanskrit work Bhagavad. His Abhangas show the warmth of devotion. He demonstrated through his own conduct that there is no need to renounce worldly matters for attaining the highest truth, Paramarth. He was a teacher of the people in the true sense of the term. He believed that our Marathi language was inferior to no other language. He asked the Sanskrit scholars forcefully, संस्कृत वाणी देवे केली तरी प्राकृत काय चोरापासूनही झाली? He heavily criticized those who hated other religions. Sant Tukaram. He belonged to Dehu near Pune. His compositions or abhangas are very pleasing and lucid, reaching the greatest poetic heights. His Gatha is a precious treasure of the Marathi language. He asks us to find God by showing love to the unhappy and tormented in the following lines. जे का रंजले गांजले त्यासी म्हणे जो आपुले तोची साधू ओळखावा देव तेथेची जाणावा. With this viewpoint, he threw in the river Indrayani the documents of the loans that people had borrowed from him and freed many poor families from the bonds of loan. He criticized the hypocrisy and superstition in the society in very strong terms. He stressed that devotion, bhakti, should be coupled with morality. His teachings can be summed up as जोडोनिया धन उत्तम व्यवहारे उदास विचारे वेच करी उदार विचारे वेच करी. Some dogmatic people opposed the social awakening that he had undertaken and sank his abhangas in the Indrayani. Sant Tukaram faced the opposition with noble courage. Work of Sants. Sants gave the message of equality to people. They taught humanity. They preached that people should live together in harmony, unity and love. Their work resulted social awakening. They taught how to live in the face of foreign invasions, drought-like situations, or any other natural calamities. Their teachings proved to be a big support for the people. Their work created self-confidence among the people of Maharashtra. The sons elucidated the complex dharma of the scholars, shastris and pandits in the language of the people. They prayed to God using simple everyday terms. They took the view that all are equal before God. They taught society to do away with the pride arising out of the caste and varna and see everyone as God's children. A characteristic of the sons was that they did not forget their duties on the path of devotion. They found God in their work. Sant Savata said, "Kanda mula bhaji avaghi vithai samaji." This statement refers to farm work but applies to work in all walks of life. The sons carried on with their duties even as they were engaged in devotion, teaching and composing verses. They developed the moral sensibilities of the society. Ramdas Swami. He was from Jam in Marathwada. He explained the importance of physical fitness to the people. Maratha tituka melvava, Maharashtra dharma vadhavava. This message of Ramdas Swami is famous. He gave practical education and lessons in good conduct through his works like Dasput, Karunashtaka, Manache Shlok. He stated the importance of people's movement and organization and founded the Samartha Sampradaya. Safar was the center of this Sampradaya. He propagated the worship of Ram and Hanuman. He travelled far and wide to propagate his thoughts. Foreign rule. Such was the political, social, cultural situation, etc. in Maharashtra before the times of Shivaji Maharaj. In that period, Maharashtra was under the control of Adil Shahi and other powers. It was not independent. Even so, some personalities and streams of thought were dreaming of freedom. Among them, Shivaji Maharaj, who considered to be a visionary of Swaraj, was on the forefront.